I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to today's presenter, Brian Dillon. Brian is an account executive within GP Strategies' HCM Technology Solutions Group. He's focused on helping organizations drive measurable business results through the use of human capital management technologies. During his experience supporting strategic HCM technology initiatives, Brian has worked with many of the leading vendors in the marketplace and specializes in helping organizations put the right people and processes in place to help select, implement, and support learning and talent management technologies. So with that, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and turn presenter rights over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here after hearing those stellar credentials that Kayla just read for me. Many of you may be surprised to hear that this is actually the first time that I've been invited to host a webinar here at GP Strategies. So I'm extremely excited to be here today and certainly appreciate everyone joining. So let me just quickly move on to the next slide, make sure we're up and running here. Perfect. So as Kayla mentioned, if you're one of the more dedicated GP Strategies webinar attendees, you likely already know that today is the last session in the 2016 Learning Trends Series. Feeling a lot of pressure, but I think we're going to have a good session here. As part of the series, I was actually asked to speak about the topic, New Developments in Cloud-Based Learning Technologies. Now this is a topic, while seemingly innocent, that is one that I approach with a good deal of trepidation. But before I explain that, let's just quickly take a step back and start our conversation by talking a little bit about the learning technology industry. So as you may not be surprised to hear, learning technology is big business. The marketplace for core learning technologies has been growing by double digits for pretty much as long as anyone can remember, and the overall market is expected to grow to over $7 billion in sales by the end of 2018. And if I can just do a check, can everyone hear me okay? I apologize, I should have done that before.
I hear you just fine.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. As I was saying, the learning technology industry is going to reach $7 billion by 2018. In addition to all the money that organizations are spending on the technology itself, they're also spending all sorts of dollars in order to have the pleasure to work with the good folks in the learning consulting industry, which we humbly represent here today. However, for all of that investment in technology and consulting, LMS dissatisfaction really still remains essentially at an all-time high. There's all sorts of stats in the industry that would support this. For instance, we have here that Brandon Hall Group thinks that about a third of the organizations that use learning technology would not recommend their LMS to colleagues. However, for those of us in the industry, I don't really think we need any statistics to back this up necessarily, because we've lived it and we've seen it every day. And I think we all sort of inherently know that the state of learning technology really isn't a great one. There's a lot of dissatisfaction in the marketplace. So when you take all of those kind of basic issues and throw in the fact that as an industry we spend countless hours attending all sorts of webinars like this one, lunch and learn, speaker panels, conferences, and symposiums, all discussing the shiny new technology trend without addressing really the kind of fundamental issues that the industry is going through, that's where the trepidation that I mentioned before does come into play. So to kind of sum up the thinking there's a pretty famous entrepreneur named Derek Sivers who once said, if information were the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. And what he meant by that was that we really don't have an information problem in our society. We have an execution problem. So today, rather than adding another voice to the learning technology echo chamber, if you will, I thought I would simply endeavor to use a small amount of time that we have here today to discuss a few basic actionable steps that you could take today to improve your collective learning technology lives. A pretty ambitious goal, I know, but let's give it a shot and get going here. All right. So topic number one, embrace your LMS vendor. As we said before, folks are clearly not happy with their learning technology providers. If you're like an LMS owner in most organizations, you probably have a semi-confrontational, maybe frigid relationship with your LMS vendor. That is to say, if you're even on speaking terms at this point. And believe me, I get it. I've worked with all the leading vendors in the space. We're a system-neutral company at GP Strategies, and I know that this can be a tough group to love sometimes. So I certainly can understand the perspective if that's how you feel. But one interesting point that I challenge you to consider is that given that we do work with every vendor in the marketplace, if you name any LMS provider, no matter how objectionable you may currently find them to be at this moment, I can likely name an organization that is using that exact same product but is pretty happy with it. So I think that really raises an interesting question. What makes those companies different? And I think there are really a lot of answers to that question, but in order to get to the truth of the matter, let's try to imagine who these companies are, where they come from, where can we find them. And when I think about these companies, and I can imagine specific ones that I've seen over the years, I think you can find them on the LMS vendor's website or the ATS vendor's website or the Performance Solutions website, praising the product in a high production video. I think you can find them at the organization's annual user conference, usually presenting alongside an executive from the company, smiling and shaking hands. They're probably authoring white papers and receiving awards for their accomplishments, and they're also probably participating in pilot programs, getting access to new system functionality and helping to shape the product to meet their needs, while the rest of the LMS unwashed masses really can't get a support ticket answered. So when I think of these people, I think it's a good question to ask, what's the common denominator here? What makes these guys different? And I'd argue that the key theme is that these companies are finding ways to both help themselves and to help the LMS vendor. In all of these scenarios that I just mentioned, really these organizations are taking a good amount of effort to help out the LMS vendor. They're joining reference calls, they're writing white papers, and I think when we look at the way that many organizations sort of view their relationship with any technology provider that they work with, they really view it through a customer-vendor paradigm. And they really spend a lot of time thinking about what they deserve and what the LMS provider should be doing for them, and really never thinking about what they can do to reciprocate or help matters in the relationship. This is certainly well within an organization's right. As we discussed, a lot of money is spent acquiring LMS technology. However, we do have to acknowledge that we live in an imperfect world, and we buy technology from organizations that are made up of people, and that sometimes in order to be successful, you have to give a little bit more than you get. So when we look at what the action is here, we promise simple, actionable takeaways. The first thing I'd recommend and challenge everyone to do is to reach out to your LMS vendor, whoever your primary contact may be. It could be an account manager of some sort, and this is really ideal if you can do this while you're negotiating with them when you're starting a new relationship, because it sets a great tone. But I challenge you to say, hey, I really want to be your top customer this year. I want to work with you to become beyond successful. I want to be a part of the new pilot programs you have going on. I want to be a customer reference. I want to speak at your conference, and ask them what you can do together to make that happen. If you do this, I think you'll be very surprised by the results that you get. These are folks that are probably fielding complaint calls all day, every day. So the notion that somebody would be reaching out, asking how they can help, and believe me, they need help with these things, I think will yield a result that you'll be very happy with, and it could change the dynamic of your relationship entirely. All right. So the next topic I wanted to discuss a little bit, which I thought might be of interest, is integrated talent management. Now, this is definitely on the short list of topics that really warrant a lot of buzz within the talent management and learning and broader human capital management sort of media sphere. So just to, even though it's probably a topic that is probably pretty familiar to most folks, just to give a quick primer, really when we look at the human capital management technology market, it's traditionally been really fragmented with a variety of different point solutions that each focus on an individual function. So examples of that would, of course, be the LMS that we were just talking about, perhaps an applicant tracking system for recruiting, maybe a performance management solution for employee reviews, et cetera. And so although these kind of separate functional systems were always really inherently related, because they all really aim to optimize employee and organizational performance, these separate applications really never interacted with one another in a meaningful way in the past. However, in recent years, of course, that's very much changed with a new breed of integrated talent management suites coming into the marketplace, which now make it possible for organizations to really bring together these once isolated processes. So examples of that would be tying learning to career development, for instance. So if an employee has an objective to move to a certain position in a certain number of years, they can take training within the platform that would help them move towards that goal. Another example outside of learning could potentially be tying performance ratings with compensation. So if an employee has a performance review score, that can be fed into the compensation suite and utilized as a data point to help derive what their total rewards might look like. So if you're an organization that has not already moved to an integrated talent management suite, then I'd argue that most aren't all the way there. I'd say it's very few who are really kind of fully along that development path. Chances are you will be talking about this soon in a boardroom near you. So as a learning leader, likely in your organization, or somebody who's involved with talent management in any capacity in your organization, it's probably a good time to ask yourself how prepared you are for that. And so from my experience, I can report that from attending many meetings where a bunch of folks from different cross-functional groups have been brought together by senior management, either because the executive suite wants better analytics, they need more support for their 2020 people strategy, or probably more likely they just really want cost savings from one cloud contract. There's a likely chance that you all be pulled together, and when I've seen people pulled together in this environment, it's always shocking how little they seem to know each other and how little collaboration seems to be occurring across these different areas that we discussed. Typically, you might have a CLO in the room, and the CLO kind of knows the head of talent acquisition, but he's new, so they don't really talk much. The CLO sort of knows the VP of talent management. They talk maybe once a year, but they're not really collaborating in a meaningful way, and these projects are really bringing them together for the first time, and there can be a lot of friction and a lot of problems because of that. So if you are in this situation, knowing that all organizations will probably eventually move to an integrated talent management suite, it just makes a lot of sense in terms of the the improved functionality as well as the cost savings. And knowing that somebody is going to get credit for this eventual project, I think it's a worthwhile question to ask. Why can't it be you? So if that's an intriguing concept at all, what I'd say is probably the next question you ask is, well, how can I do that? So the recommendation I'd give is really, if you're working and learning, one of the greatest assets that you can bring to the table is that you can help people solve problems. This is a really great opportunity to take advantage of that specific skill set. So I'd recommend maybe you go to your head of talent management, ask them what positions are they having trouble recruiting for, what skill sets are hard for them to find in the marketplace, and should you be talking about a joint project to help develop those skills internally? If you talk to your talent management team, what key gaps are they seeing in critical competencies? Do they have any thoughts about how they're going to close those? Is there a way that you can help? I think you'll find that if you're not communicating openly, that there's a lot of very common ways that you can work together, and really no matter what you do, just try to help them solve problems. And sort of a very similar theme to the LMS point made before, but above all, just try to build a relationship. Chances are you'll be working together very closely, very shortly, if you don't already. So just take the opportunity to be a linchpin in that process. Talent management implementation projects can be complex if you're integrating multiple modules together, but what we rarely see is a project fail because of the technology itself. Typically, it's an issue in people and process, so be that leader in the process, create the relationships now so that you can help drive that initiative forward. So the takeaway for today, your action for this moment is go talk to a colleague in HR, talent management, talent acquisition, HRIT, anyone. Talk to them about the weather. It doesn't really matter, but just go say hi. You can even tell them that I sent you, and you can send the link to the webinar. But just start building that relationship now, and I think you'll find that it will pay some significant dividends down the line. All right. So just one more tidbit here. This is also when we look at trends. I think folks have been talking about mobile for about 5 years now, as long as I've been in the industry. And it doesn't really seem like all that much has changed. So since this comes up so much, and I always get the impression that organizations aren't leveraging mobile content as frequently as maybe the industry dialogue would imply, I thought I'd just hit on a few key points here that we see from our own content development team. So really those two big points are both content and technology. So the courseware that you're launching and the technology you're using to launch it. So when we look at content, I think one of the biggest misnomers in the industry is that developing a mobile strategy means having all of your content within your organization available on all mobile devices. The reason why this doesn't really make much sense, moving all of your courseware to a mobile delivery strategy, is because it's really important to consider the context in which your learners are accessing learning on mobile devices. I think it's been said frequently, but it isn't often internalized, that these folks are looking for quick learning bites that address specific performance enablement needs, and therefore it really wouldn't make sense to try to get an hour-long compliance course mobile enabled. It's not a if you build it, they will come type scenario. Learners are really going to only use this content if they can quickly use it to solve a specific problem that they have. So I think focusing on a very narrow set of content that would fit that criteria is probably one of the first things that organizations should do. And then secondly, when we look at the technology itself, a common question we often hear our team ask customers is, what mobile devices do you want to be able to support in this courseware? And invariably, the answer we always receive back is, oh, how about all of them? How about that? And while it's a really nice thought, when one considers really the universe of devices that are out there that are available, that really just isn't a practical or worthwhile goal to move towards. Being everything to everyone is a costly and time-consuming proposition. And one of the things to consider is if you're completing development for a package of courses, consider that for every piece of content that is created, it's going to have to be tested on a representative mobile device. If it takes 1 hour to test each piece of courseware on each device, plus any additional time that might be needed to remediate the issues that are uncovered through the mobile testing process, all of a sudden you have a very long, very expensive testing process that will likely not be worth the time and effort that you have to put into it. So what I'd say here, if we're going to talk about takeaways, don't try to boil the ocean if you're still trying to wrap your head around mobile. We've seen so many organizations go out and buy a pallet full of iPads and say, yep, this is our mobile strategy, looking forward to it, without actually thinking about what the goal is. So don't start there. Start with a very limited and modest goal. Choose one performance enablement issue that your business is facing today. Make sure it's a quantifiable pain if at all possible. I think sales groups, to give a plug to the industry that I work in, would be a great place to start. They have folks in the field that have obviously problems that can be tied very directly to revenue growth. So I'd say create a mobile pilot program for one of those very specific quantifiable pains to address that issue, and limit your audience and also limit the range of devices involved, and have a plan for tracking your results so that you can quantify the impact of the program when you are presenting at your LMS vendors next conference next year. If you can start there, I think you'll quickly find that folks will come to you and you can organically expand the program from there. All right. So those are just three quick topics we want to review. So now really we're hoping to have an open dialogue. So we're moving to question and answers here. Kayla, is this a good time to pass it back to you?
It is. Thank you, Brian. I think everyone would agree that you did an awesome job, your first webinar with us. So I hope you now know that we hope you have bandwidth to do more. So it's not easy to cram in this much information in 20 minutes. So we have a few minutes left. And so just as a reminder, if you do have a question, be sure to enter it into the Q&A module at this time. As everyone probably noticed, we covered a lot in only 20 minutes, and there's obviously still more information that could be discussed. So we do encourage you to continue the conversation with Brian beyond today's session. His contact information is available in the slide deck. And I'd also like to remind you that the recording and the slides from today will be sent to the email address that you provided when you registered. So at this point, it does look like we have a couple of questions coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and just start passing these to you, Brian. First one is, how do you recommend becoming friends with the LMS vendor who does not return your calls?
Yeah, regrettably, that's not completely uncommon, particularly if you've sort of been a long-time customer, maybe have an on-premise installation of the software. Sometimes you can get lost in the shuffle. So if that's the case, or even if you're potentially working with maybe a lower-ranking account executive or account manager that doesn't necessarily have much sway in the organization, from your opinion, I'd recommend this. Try to get on LinkedIn or any other channel that you can and contact anyone within the sales organization of that vendor. A vice president of sales would be perfect. If they have a product sales representative who's somebody who focuses on selling that specific product that you're using, that would be even better. But those are the people who are going to be really interested in working with customers that are motivated to create case studies, to be a positive reference, and they'll have the clout you need in the organization to really move the cause forward. Of course, if you're having lots of specific tactical issues, you should be ready to work with them a little bit and allocate a little bit of budget for potentially some professional services support. But if you go in with a positive attitude, I think representatives with those titles from the organization would be more than willing to take the first step towards helping you out.
Great. We're about a minute over, so those of you who can still stay on, we have a couple more questions coming in. Have you seen organizations move to a truly integrated talent management suite, or are they successful?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's one of those things where anecdotally, I don't get the impression that there's a majority of organizations that have really gotten their house in order with regards to an integrated talent management strategy. Partially that's because the universe of what integrated talent management is continues to expand as analytics are continually added to these platforms, other components. We see that the suite continues to expand, which kind of makes it challenging for organizations to keep up. I don't think many organizations have really kind of rolled out truly integrated suites at this time, and we have seen some difficulties just based on those silos that I discussed before. The fact that the system now brings together a universe of people who traditionally haven't worked together, and now that we're talking about SaaS or cloud technologies, IT is really no longer in many instances kind of running the system. So it puts a whole new group of people in charge of a system in a way that they likely haven't been in the past. So it's been an endeavor that a lot of organizations have had some troubles with, but overall I think they'd all agree that the folks we've worked with that it's been well worth any effort that's gone into it. So that's how I'd answer that.
Great answer. Have you seen mobile initiatives track back to register a completion in the LMS? Do you allow them to download the content or stream it? Do you have any tips or stories you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of organizations probably don't appreciate that if they're using an industry standard LMS, you know, somebody that the platform's updated and you know, a relatively enterprise-grade product, it likely already has the ability to track mobile completions. If your courseware is designed appropriately based on your LMS, tracking completions on mobile devices is certainly achievable. It's not difficult. So that's definitely something that can happen, and I think the other part of the question was, you know, whether download's possible. And we do see a lot of products that have sort of offline players. If you have a workforce that maybe doesn't have access to Wi-Fi consistently, they can take the course offline, and then when they do get access to a Wi-Fi or internet source, their progress can then be updated in the system. So we do see that as a standard set of functionality that already exists in most industry-leading LMS providers.
Well, thank you. It doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in. Of course, if you do still have a question, you can always email Brian directly. So we'll go ahead and start wrapping things up. I want to say thank you again to today's speaker, Brian Dillon, and thanks to everyone who attended for your time and attention. We do hope that you'll join us again for our next webinar, which is going to be hosted actually by our partners at ATD. This will be on forecasting success, exploring learning trends for 2016 and beyond. This will be on February 9th at 2 p.m., and it will be a great recap of all of the wonderful learning trends that we've predicted for this year. And so for GP Strategies, I'm Kayla Rotz, and I wish everyone a good day.
Thank you.